primeiro seminário agora da manhã vai ser sobre contar para vocês um pouquinho da história do síncrotron, e nada melhor do que alguém que participou dessa história. Então é um prazer ter o Yves Petroff, que é o diretor do LNLS. Ele aceitou o convite de vir falar para vocês sobre a história do síncrotron, e ele vai ser o primeiro a falar para contar um pouquinho da história dele e a história do síncrotron aqui. E esse primeiro seminário vai ser em inglês, mas pode ser em francês também, se alguém precisar. If can speak both English and French, if necessary.
Even Russian, if you like.
Russian as well. Mas vocês podem... Portuguese as well. Mas vocês podem perguntar em português, inglês, francês ou russo.
Okay. I would like to thank the organizer for asking me to give a small talk on history. My main message is to show you the enormous evolution between the beginning of synchrotron, where the brightness of the sources was in the 10 to the 12, 13 photons per second per 0.1% bandwidth per millimeter square, milliradian square. Now it's about 10 to the 20, 10 to the 21. So it's 8, 9 orders of magnitude above. And with Sirius, it will be probably at 13 orders of magnitude. Now, every time that happens in science, these kind of changes, you have fantastic new opportunities. And my main message is, if people tell you this is impossible, just do it. Don't believe them. Okay? So, I just make my short presentation because most of you probably don't know me. I did my thesis at the Laboratoire de l'École Normale Supérieure in Paris. At that time in France, you had to have a small thesis, 3 years. And if they were successful, then you had a 5-year thesis, okay? And you had to build a new equipment. And then at the end, after that, you had to have, 1 week before, they will give you a new subject, completely different field. And you had to make a presentation of 1 hour on the subject. It was complicated. Okay, now it's only 3 years, much better. I was then an NSF fellow for 4 years at Berkeley at 74. I was professor in 75, Department of Physics. I was the only one professor probably that resigned after a year, because I decided that fantastic opportunity, quality of student in Berkeley, fantastic, very good environment. But there was a possibility to start to do angular result photo emission at Lure, at Orsay, and much before the other. And I decided that it was worthwhile. Okay, so I moved my group of 1 student and 1 researcher and 1 engineer from the NS laboratory to the aqua storage ring. I will describe it just later in 72. I was director of this facility for about, 10 years. Then I had a collaboration with Brazil doing the construction of the synchrotron here. Some of the scientists here were trained at Lure. After that, I was Director General of the SRF in Grenoble, which was the first 3rd generation sources. And that was a big step, because mostly using ondulator and very low emitters, it was an enormous difference. Then I moved back to Berkeley for almost 2 years. I was president of IUPAP for 5 years. I was director at the Ministry of Research, deputy director of a large facility like CERN, ESRF, and so on. And then I was involved also in some European projects. Then I came in 2009 at the demand of José Roque, crazy idea, to come here. And I was scientific director for some years. Then I came back the next few years for 2 months per year. And finally now, last August, they asked me to come as director for a short time. Okay, now, synchronization. Wave are emitted when you have a charged particle. It can be electron, but any charged particle. If you accelerate the particle, it produces radiation. And it's called synchrotron radiation. Now, typically, if you like to have hard X-ray or soft X-ray, you must have GeV machine. 1 GeV, 2, 3D, 5, 6 GeV machine. You cannot, I mean, in the beginning it was not the case. I started in a machine between 150 and 500 MeV, which is mostly VUV and soft X-ray. Now, this was predicted by Ivanenko and Pomeranchuk, one Russian guy and one Ukrainian guy, in '44. He was first observed on a very tabletop synchrotron in 1947 at General Electric, about 1 meter diameter, made of glass. There was a UV spectroscopy experiment done at Cornell in '56. Surf at NIST in Washington built a small storage ring of 180 MeV. The problem with 180 MeV, lifetime is terrible. And now people don't care because you inject all the time. That was not existing at that time. So you had only 30 minutes to do your experiment very quickly, and the current was going down very quickly. Now, the first absorption spectra recorded in Europe was done by a French woman, Yvette Cauchois, who was a very good X-ray physicist. And she did the experiment not on a storage ring, on a synchrotron. Very often there's a confusion. People believe that a storage ring is the same thing that a synchrotron is not. A synchrotron, you don't have a constant energy for the electron. You are ramping the magnet all the time up and down, and with the radio frequency cavity, you have to synchronize the injection to get compensation of the emission of the... Now, in the beginning, because there was no storage ring, people started to use synchrotron, but it was a pain in the neck. It was very complicated. Signal to noise was not very good. But at least it showed that it was possible. So people in Japan built a 750 MeV storage ring in '65. They started to do, on a synchrotron, to do experiment of absorption in '67. Tantalus, Wisconsin, built 240 MeV storage ring, very small one, 2 or 3 meters, in '69, and it was for many years of a very nice experimental setup. We started to build, ACO was built in '65 for energy physics, and it started to be used in '73 for synchrotron radiation. And at the same time, Spear at Stanford, they built a 3 GeV storage ring. Okay, so now, synchrotron radiation. The electron beam is characterized by the emittance, which is the product of the size of the beam by the divergence, okay? And this has to be as small as possible. And so you have it in a perpendicular plane to the electron, you have sigma x and sigma y. Now, if you look at Sirius, UVX is about 1 nanometer radian, very bad, probably one of the worst with Cornell. However, still a very good science is done today on this very old machine, but there are things that you cannot do. You cannot exploit the coherence of the beam, partial coherence of the beam, and things like that. Now, you can see that Sirius, you will be moving almost by a factor of 1,000. So it's an enormous gain, but it's not, you will be gaining, in fact, million, not a factor of 1,000. Why? Well, in a normal storage ring, what you have is, you have a small LINAC, which injects electron at 150 MeV. It goes in an intermediate ring called booster, where you raise the energy until the energy of your system, which will be here 3 GeV. And then after that, now, every time that the electrons, which are bunched by the radio frequency cavity at the level of few millimeters, go in a bending magnet, they are deviated and they emit synchrotron radiation with a broad white band here. And at a very good vertical emittance, but the horizontal is very broad. And this is not ideal for science. So people started at third generation, but even before, to decide to do something else, which is to use ondulators. In an ondulator, you create a sinusoidal magnetic field, so the electron perpendicular will have the same sinusoid. And if you have n pole, n equals 100, in principle on the paper you gain a factor square of that, which is 10 to the 4th. In fact, after 2 or 3 meters, your ondulator is linear. So, but you gain a factor 5,000. So 5,000 plus 1,000 here. You can see what the difference you will have between this UVX machine, except for the only ondulator existing today here for the soft X-ray. But on the other beamline, you will be gaining factor million, which is absolutely enormous. Now, in addition to that, in some cases, you don't need even to have a monochromator because the line that you get here, there is a fundamental and the harmonics, which can go until 4 keV, kilovolts, depending on the energy of the machine. The width is about 10 minus 2. So for imaging, you don't need, in many cases, to use a monochromator. You just use one of the harmonics, and that's very interesting. So typically, on a storage ring, you have the bending magnet in blue, quadrupole and hexapole, which allow to focus the beam of electrons, and then ondulator. And that's typically what you have. So you can see the first generation, 10 to the 13, that was done on a parasitic way for high energy machines. And they did not like it that too much, so you have to be very gentle with them to get the beam line and so on. But finally, it was showing that you could gain a factor 10 to the 3 compared to an X-ray tube at that time. Then people started to build storage rings just for synchronization. The brightness was then 10 to the 15, but only with bending magnets. And the third generation was really a big breakthrough because they moved it to 10 to the 19, 10 to the 20 by having 3 or 4 nanometer radian plus ondulator. And the fourth generation is based on ondulator. And a very simple idea of Dieter Einfeld, a German machine physicist, who say, instead to take a bending magnet of 2 meters, I divided the bending magnet of 2 meters in 3 bending magnets of 66 centimeters. And then he showed that you can gain an emittance a factor 3 at the cube, which is 27, without any effort. So today in the world, everybody is trying to upgrade the existing machine because you don't need to build new beam. Well, you have to modify beamline and things like that, but you can keep the same machine, remove the old beam, and put a new one. This is what the SLS is doing today. So the coherent beam, in '94, it was realized almost immediately that there was a partial coherence in the beam. How do you see it? You see speckle. And the speckle, if you take the laser here, you see immediately that you have speckle. And that's due to the fact that you have a very good coherence. I remind you that coherence means small sources, monochromatic, and with a small divergence. Now, if you take this light here, you take a pinhole, you will have a small divergence. And if you take the white light, you monochromatize it, you will have also monochromatic, except you have no photon left. So with the ondulator, it's completely different. You have so many photons in the beginning that at the end you have partial coherence, especially in the soft X-ray. Now, in the soft X-ray on Sirius, you will be totally coherent. In hard X-ray, you get less, but still a large fraction. And this is very important and completely new imaging possibility has happened. Okay. Now, this is the first machine which has been a revolution for energy physics. This is an idea of a theoretician, Bruno Touchek, in Italy, who say that, well, it will be interesting for energy physics to have a double NL, one with electron, the other one with positron below. And that's the case here. And then to make collision between the electron and the positron. Now, everything today is based on that idea. If you take CERN, Fermilab, and so on, collision in energy physics are very important. It can be with electrons, with photons, with everything you like. So they built it in 61, but they had only a synchrotron. They did not have a plate, an injector. To be able to have positron, electron of 250 MeV is fine, but to have positron of 250 MeV, you need to have electron of 500 MeV, and then you get the positron. So they moved the system, which is very small, to Orsay, and between 63 and 65, they did experiment, and that was the first electron-positron collision observed. And this is really the beginning of fine energy physics that exists today. So after that, they moved it back because they were building a new machine. This is a small storage ring that I have been using for some years, which is ACO. It was built in 65 for energy physics, and we started to use it to build a beamline in 71, and in 73 we started to do experiments with that. It can go from 150 to 540 MeV, and has been used for synchrotron radiation between 73 and 88. Now here you have the bending magnet, quadrupole, anglopole, and this is the radio frequency camera. Now, personally, the reason why I started to be interesting is the following. During my thesis at the École Normale, I studied the electronic property between 3 and 20 eV of 2,6 compounds, semiconductor. I built a setup able to work at 1.5 kilovolts until 11 eV because we needed to use lithium fluoride window, otherwise there's no transmission. And we were cleaving the sample at this low temperature. And I had a lot of collaboration with Marvin Cohen and Jim Chaddy and Walter Berkeley. Now, even with new tools like wavelength modulation spectroscopy and so on, it was very clear for me that reflectivity was a dead end. Why? You need to rely to theoretical calculation. At that time, it was pseudo potential. In the pseudo potential, it was not an ab initio calculation. So you have to adjust parameters. If you start to adjust parameters with more than 2 parameters, I can adjust anything within it. So it was not a very good solution. And I started to be interested by photo emission. At that time, there was a group at Bell Laboratory, Gobeli and Allen, who had a very nice idea about photo emission. Well, this shows some of the results obtained during my thesis. At that time, there was no longer result for them. So you were doing kind of density of state, with X-ray, which is SPS, which is still used today. You get the density of state of the valence band, you get the core level, and so on. If you do UV photo emission, then you are very sensitive to the surface, and you study mostly the surface problem. Now, there was a group. Okay, I'll come back later now. In 1970, Yves, who had spent 1 year in Rome in a laboratory, heard about the synchrotron in Rome, and said, well, maybe we should do something in France and on the existing storage and put a beam. So there was a meeting with French physicist Friedel, who was pushing this idea, with the director of the linear accelerator, Marin, who was the builder of the machine, and 2 very good scientists in X-ray OTA, and the latter was a biologist. And we asked it to have the beamline installed on the apple storage. Yvette Petroff asked that a few years before, but she was kicked out because she came and said, I need a beamline next year. I needed physics to like it. So nothing happened. And it's a pity, because obviously you could have saved 2 or 3 years. Now, at that time, I was postdoc at the physics department in Berkeley, and Yves came to ask me if I was interested in doing and so on. So this is what I decided. And then Okay, angular result for the mission. As I say, Roberty and Allen were surface scientists at Bell Lab, not very well considered. It was not exotic enough for Bell Laboratory. So they were the only group working in a vacuum of 1 10 minus 10 millimeter of mercury. At that time, that was absolutely acceptable. And they had a very good idea to try to see if electrons getting out of the crystal were still conserving some memory of what they had seen in the vault. And this is the system they used. They used a special system to cleave germanium and silicon. And they put a detector here which was made with different electrodes, and they measured the current on each of them. And they found that it was not homogeneous at all, depending on the angle that you were using. Now, it took almost 10 years before people started to do this with analyzing. And then in that case, you take a very small cone, and you have energy and angle resolution. And it's called aptos, which is angular result for the mission. And you shine the light here on the sample. You can play with the polarization S and P, that's selection result. You have a theta angle here, if you measure with your detector here, and you can rotate also to have the azimuthal angle. And for two-dimensional system, the electron that goes out, an electron loses the momentum perpendicular to the sample, so you have no information on that. Now, for two-dimensional systems, they don't care. So we started with two-dimensional systems, and also Neville Smith at Bell Labs started with two-dimensional systems, and that's who it immediately. They started in '74. We started in '75. We published in '77. This is the same group at Bell Labs, and we started in Nacional. And it was immediately shown that you could get complete band structure in any direction. But for some of the band, you have that, even if it's two-dimensional, it was small perpendicular, and you could see it. So after that, we moved into real angular result for the mission, and we decided to build a special setup with a new monochromator and so on. The problem is, we had a serious problem. People who have built the monochromator at Osei, they were looking for resolution. And they had a grading in 5.0. In the VUV, this is a disaster. They were looking for resolution, but they had no possibility. Because in the VUV, every time you have a mirror, you lose 15, 20%. 5 times 15, 20%, at the end you have peanuts. So we started to do photon emission with that. Yeah. It did not work at all. So by accident, I found a paper written by Daniel Lepere describing a very simple monochromator made of a toroidal grating, entrance slit, exit slit, nothing else. I say that's fantastic. Even if we don't have the best resolution, 30 centimeters, let's try it. So one night, we cut the wall of the experimental system, we removed the old monochromator, put the new one, and the gain was 80. And it was really a course of evolution. We started to do very nice for the mission. And we decided immediately to build a 3 meter. So most of the data I will show were done with a 3 meter. And again, at that time, I contacted some specialists in the field. All of them told me, oh, forget about it. I never trust specialists. Okay. Then, very quickly, we were able to get very interesting results from complete band structure of metals like copper, nickel, showing the very strong many-body effect in nickel, first observation of surface state on core level, determination of the further surface and so on, and the first observation of the gap in 96. So, how do we do that? Well, at that time I consulted some very good theoreticians in France. Some were very positive, some were very negative. I'll not give the name of the one. very negative, but Fidel would say it will be difficult to do it.
Alguém tem alguma pergunta nesse meio tempo? A gente pode contar piada também. Se tiver alguma piada boa, pode contar. Alguém está com a folha de... Por exemplo, está passando? Está chegando. A folha dos telefones.
Okay, so after making the two-dimensional system, we moved it to three-dimensional system. One was copper. We started to get very sharp structure and be able to plot all the bands. And they show what we got. This has never been completely published. We have published in the latter part of that and so on. The theoretical calculations were done by Burdick 6 years before. They were absolutely no adjustable parameters. The only thing we took is the bottom of the valence band here. And you can see that the agreement is absolutely remarkable. Now, copper is a very simple system. If you do that with nickel, you find out that the bands are much narrower because there's a very strong many-body effect. In addition, in the middle of the valence band, there is a dual state bound state, which is a many-body effect. And I'll not discuss that in detail. Okay. Now, second example is I was attending a meeting at Stanford in '77, and John Mayday had made a free electron laser a few weeks before, and it was based on the following: you take a small accelerator, which is a LINAC, he was interested by the infrared. He put an undulator inside, which is here. And then you need to have a mirror. One which is reflecting slightly less than 100%, so you can get light out. And he was able to laser 3.6 microns. So when I came back at the laboratory, I talked with Yves Petroff. I said, why don't we put that on the storage ring? Because we could go in the visible and the UV and maybe soft as VUV. And we made a small calculation on the corner of the table, and we found that it was possible. With, 1 year later, we did a better calculation. We were off by 10 factor 10. Okay. Now, the problem we didn't any budget for that. We did not have the personnel. We didn't have any experience in the field. But that's okay. You have to try. If you don't succeed, you don't succeed. That's science. Okay. So, we were very lucky. First, because one of the agencies in France accepted to build a superconducting undulator free. At that time, there was no undulator anywhere in the storage ring, especially superconducting. And to furnish a very good student, Pascal Delon, later on was the director of the machine at EBS. Two young scientists, very good in optics, accepted to join the group, with some risk, obviously, because nobody was sure that it would work. John made a proposal of collaboration and came to us for 6 months, and left a postdoc and a student. And we observed the laser effect in '92, and then the harmonic generation. So I think it shows that sometimes you have to be creative, because obviously it's dangerous. But okay, now that was the first undulator, superconducting undulator. The only problem is that you have a fixed gap, and the gap has to be small. And in an undulator, you have all the time quadruple hexapole effect. Not very good for the beam lifetime. So some of the people were not very happy. But we were lucky because after 6 months, he died. There was a quench, and we got rid of him. So we decided immediately to build an undulator with permanent magnets. In fact, slightly more complicated. It's an optical python with 2 undulators with a dispersive section for the spherical. And again, we consulted the specialists, and the specialists say, oh, don't do that. Use electromagnet. We said, we cannot, because we need a period which is very small, 2 centimeters, not 5, 6 centimeters. So we built it out, and we get very well. We had no experience. Okay, now, we were very, very proud of that, believing that we had been the first to install undulators. And we were wrong, because almost 30 years before, 2 groups, one at Saclay, the other one at Stanford, have installed on a small LINAC an undulator, which is shown here. This is the one at Stanford, but they are the same one at Saclay. And it was installed on a small LINAC. The idea was to produce coherent radiation. How do you produce coherent radiation? The bunch length of electrons have to be of the same size of the emitted light. Okay? So, if it's perfectly coherent, you should have something corresponding to n squared, and then the number of electrons. If it's totally incoherent, it will be n. So, for n, it will be 1 microwatt. For n squared, it should be 1 milliwatt. And they found something, no, just the opposite, 1 watt. And 1 milliwatt, this is what they found. So they were partially coherent, but not completely coherent. And for a reason that nobody knows, both stop it in the same time, which is crazy. And nobody knew about this system. And we found that by accident. And Pascal Delon came for the SRF. He said, look, this has been done 20 years ago. And nobody paid attention to it. Now, the reason I think that what they stopped from my point of view is because the Mather invention is 1953. And this is probably, they say, well, there's a Mather, there's no point to have this kind of stuff. I'm almost gone. So, I chosen to discuss these two examples to show that we had a high degree of impulsiousness because they were very risky experiments. But I think at that time, a lot of people in atomic physics and biology tried the same kind of experiment. Some succeeded, some did not succeed. But that's normal life of a scientist, okay? At least you get excitement from time to time. Now, the good thing is that for 5 years, we did not have an illegal ignition. The director of the CNRS told us, well, you will get money to an agency. If you fail, nobody will see the difference. If you succeed, we'll make a CNRS level. And that happened after 5 years. In addition to zero up, also decided to put money in the level. But we had a very low budget, and in '75, we realized it made that in August, the money would be gone. Typical Brazilian situation. So I proposed to IFA to go to see the industry and say, look, why don't you do X-ray lithography for microelectronics? So they were slow, so we took our reflexivity setup and we mounted the experiment for them. In addition, the scientists at Thompson were not allowed to work at night, and we were working mostly at night. So we did the experiment for them. We got very good results, and we got a very good contract. So we finished it. Okay. We were also able to attract very foreign group in areas that we were not covering at all. Like Maurice Campagne from Munich on field photometers were left for 10 years from Aula. On soft-spectrum microscopy, Blavatsky and so on. I think that during the period of scientific production that they have been very excellent. So I think I'll go to my conclusion because I had a lot of speed of the SLF, but obviously I think it's done intentionally, so okay. But I did not bring my Mac because it's not in very good shape, and sometimes it has a tendency to stuck. I think Microsoft is worse. No, the last one. Yes, I have to go ahead. I'm not sure that. No, the conclusion. Just about. Okay. So I stay on time, otherwise they will kill me.
Because you lost a few minutes. You
Huh?
show me a second.
No, but I think Brazil has today a very good community. 1,700 users. This is very good. In general, people were believing that in the field of synchronization, the number of users will diminish. I don't think it's true. Last year, ESRF had 9,000 users. Now, during the last 10, 15 years, there have been 5 new facilities of synchronization in Europe, like the Swiss Light Source, like Diamond, like Soleil, like Petra, and so on. However, the number of users at the ESRF continue to increase. And the reason is that, first thing is, there have been all the time upgrades. Now the machine is under upgrade. Should come ahead by about 3 weeks, but they dismounted the machine in 2 months in January, February. They mounted the new storage in March and April. Now they're putting all the cables together and so on. And they should have the first beam in November with 45 beam. But the user operation will start like here, middle of next year. So I think with the community that you have here, this is very good because this is very good, an old machine. But if I check the scientific production done on this machine, there are many areas where it is excellent. And over the few 4 or 5 years, the quality of science produced here has increased tremendously. And this is very positive. Especially with the situation actually in Brazil for science, which is not very easy. Now, moving from 1 nanometer radian to 150 picoradian, but completely new possibility. And you have to adjust it. But don't be shy. You know, when we have discussion with some people of the community of SAT, they say we'd like to continue to do SAT like before. But the resolution that you will have on imaging on Sirius will be in the nanometer. Okay? So, for some experiments, SAT will be still very useful. But you have to learn how to use it. Because to get this kind of resolution, you use techniques which are new, using algorithms and so on. And you have to be careful. When you do band structure calculation, people who are not doing very good job, they just bought a program and they put the parameter and they publish. Sometimes they are bugged in the program and they publish the bug too. In addition, when you have to Fourier transform an image, you must have people who are very good in applied mathematics and so on, and there's a very good book here now. And if it's in biology, you must have biologists next to you, because you don't use the same algorithm for the biology or for solid state physics. Otherwise, you publish in physics, and there are a lot of publicists. So, don't be shy. Try risky experiment. Very important. Second, don't trust the special. If people tell you, oh, don't do that, it's impossible. You fail in that side. Now, in 2011, with EBS, we decided to build 2 beam lines with the following characteristic. At that time, the budget of the lab was low, but still higher than today, which is amazing. We should have increased tremendously. But the situation is with us. Now, the idea was the following. They should be cheap, because we did not have too much money. They should be built in-house as much as possible. Detector, not at that time, in the future. Yes. And they should be exciting scientific. Now, we decided to one imaging beam line. Why imaging? Because it's a booming field at all the third generation facilities. And for Sirius, it takes a time to prepare the community. It takes 2 or 3 years. You have to learn about new technique and so on. So if you don't do that before, now they are very good group here. I think there's a good community in Brazil, which was not the case at that time. I remember visiting the museum in Rio, where they had an X-ray scanner. They were very proud because they were getting 1.5 millimeter resolution in imaging. And we told them with Jose, look, you know they are synchrotron. They never heard about synchrotron. They didn't know they were synchrotron. And we said, look, I mean, with synchrotron today, it's not micron. You can go much below that. So it's very important, the community. And now there's a very good community with many applications in many fields. In agriculture, for soil, for petroleum and everything. I mean, there's many applications. That was the first one. The second one was an infrared beam line. Why infrared? Because it's the cheapest beam line that you can put on the storage. Okay? But it's just an interferometer. It was built here. Everything was built here. It's the interferometer that we go. Now, the difference here, we decided to go beyond what we, there are about 30 beam lines in the infrared. We said, look, if we put an AFM tip, because somebody has done it with a Lobar in Germany, and we were so excited about that, we said, look, a Lobar, the intensity is 500 times smaller than the synchrotron. So let's put it on the synchrotron, even if it's all synchrotron, noisy and everything. Push one to try. A lot of people were against it. They said, well, that will never work and so on. Now, it's one of the best beam lines here, and the resolution is about 25 nanometers, both in spectroscopy and imaging. And there are only 3 like that in the world for the moment. Why? Because for a long time, people were believing that laser in that area will solve the problem. The problem with laser, they are narrow band, and the infrared, you have a band here, you have a band here, what would you do here? So, synchronization on Sirius will allow to go to 100 microns, and with this kind of resolution, fantastic opportunity in many years. So both beamline have been slightly risky, and when we were talking with the community, all community was saying, oh no, the tendency of the people to continue to do what they have been doing in the new ways, and that's not very good. You have to move to a new area. So don't be shy. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the enlightening talk. We have time for questions. Tem uma pergunta em português, inglês, russo e francês também. Alguém tem alguma pergunta? Don't be shy. Tem uma aqui.
Don't mean to get too philosophical, but since you've seen so much advance in science in the last few years, how would you think that series could change the way we do science in Brazil?
Well, that's a good question. My worry is the following. The cut in the budget in the last few years in Brazil in general has been such, I've never seen that in any country. I've been seeing cuts when I was in the US or some cuts in France. Even at the ESF we had one day a cut. But I fighted the cut, finally we gained it. But the cut was 1%. So we are not in the same world. I mean the last few years. Today, the laboratory, the course, NPM, it's a level of 10 years ago.
Yeah.
10 years ago. So, and the number of people working in the laboratory and the quality of the science has tremendously increased. Now, as I say, you have a community of 700 users. If those users have no money in their laboratory to prepare their experiment, you cannot use the thing. And for me, it's a total stupidity that people. We are building, and the government is very proud about Sirius and so on, except the minister had never showed up here, where he has been away in eight or nine countries. I've never seen that. I mean, they say it's fantastic and so on, blah, 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 and so on, but he does not show up. And it's obvious that you have a project of this type, he should have come here. Now, maybe he's afraid to come, but I can understand with all the cuts that he does. So, from my point of view, this is my work, because if people are not able to prepare the experiment, how you can deploy this kind of machine? Okay? You must have very good samples. Now, the philosophy now here is to try to have as much preparation tool here in the laboratory. Why? For the following reason. If you do imaging now, in every facility in the world, people, when they do imaging, they don't get the direct data immediately. Here there has been an effort with NVIDIA and with the applied group here of mathematicians and so on to develop algorithms which allow to have in real time. Why it's important? You take data for doing 3D, but you don't have the real image. So it's only when you go back home that you realize they are no good, they are not good. It's a disaster. Why? Because you have to wait 6 months. Science, 6 months is a lot. So the idea is that people can get here their data immediately and analyze them and restart the experiment the next day. Now, in other areas where there will be facilities like the MPE, the data deposition and so on, so people can prepare the sample here if they cannot do it. That's the maximum that we can do. But people, if you have synchrotron where the user don't get help by the synchrotron people, the level go down and die very quickly. And even for very good facility, for a long time, if you take Spring 8, which is one of the best machines in the world, very low emissions, fantastic technology and so on, for a long time, the scientific production was not at all at the level of APS, ESRF, or ALS, and so on. And there was a delegation of the ministry a few years ago that came to see us at ESRF, and they say, can you explain what the reason? I say, very simple. At spring age, if people come, well, people tell them, this is the beamline, good luck. No help at all. Now, that was good for us because at DSRF, there was a good scientist, Sakura Pascarelli, who just moved to the Free Electron later now. She got a contract from Toyota of 300,000 euro per year for 5 years. It was fantastic. So I asked the director of Toyota Europe, why do you go to Springate? Oh, he said, we go to Springate, but we don't get any help. And then we spend 1 month with 5 scientists there, and we get very few results. So they came at DSRF, they were so happy that after 5 years they say, now we know what to do. We go back to Springate, we build a beam line ourselves, and we put our scientists on the beam line, so they have no problem. And this is something which is very important. And I think the lab in that area is doing quite well.
Mais perguntas?
Could you repeat, please, the 4 synchrotron generations? I would like to know if you could repeat your explanation and the 4 synchrotron generations in the beginning.
First, second, third, and fourth generation of synchrotron. What the difference between them?
Yeah, the difference.
Well, the difference is the emittance that moved from 100 nanometer to the 4th would be 150 picometers, factor 1,000. And in the same time, nobody used bending magnet anymore, except for specific experiments where you use a super band with much more high energy and so on. Everybody is trying to use an undulator because with the undulator, you gain factor 5,000 more plus the emittance is factor 1 million. 1 million when you get in an optical source. I started to do Raman scattering in the visible with one of the first dilators in Berkeley. And it was a miracle. Well, the laser was dying we had to change the window every 2 hours. But we could see a forbidden exciton resonance of 1 billion. Almost immediately. So it's a new science that you can do. I think there will be a lot of interesting things on future.
Thank you.
Se vocês estão perdidos nos termos técnicos, não se preocupem, que isso vai ficar mais claro para vocês agora durante a semana. Vocês estão aqui para isso. Até o final da semana, está todo mundo sabendo o que é ondulador, o que é magnet.
If you have any questions during all the weekend,
during your talk, you told us about several limitations you had during your trajectory, and now I am asking myself, what's the next challenge, technical challenge about synchrotron light and in this field for the near future?
Actually, we are starting in the field of storage. If you like to do better than a source like Syria, you have to build a machine which is 2 or 3, 4 kilometer circumference, okay? It will cost a fortune to get perfectly coherent radiation. Is that worthwhile to put so much money? I don't think so. From my point of view, the good thing about this new lattice is the fact that you can take an old storage ring and just remove the ring itself, keep most of the beam line. It does not mean that there was a seminar here by a guy from Soleil 3 weeks ago, and he was saying that the scientists were not interested to change their beam. And he said that first they started to study a machine at 150 picometers per radian, and now they are working on a machine at 77 picometers. And I said, look, if you are looking for this kind, you have a serious problem if you don't change your beam, because one of the main problems that you will be facing is you will not be keeping the brilliance, the brightness that you have for a very simple reason. Today, the monochromator or the mirror in most of the facility are at the level of 100 nanoradian of stability. The one built here over 4 or 5 years is at 15 nanoradian, and that's fitting this kind of new force. But if you don't try to change yourself, then you're in trouble. So it's everything that has to change, the same way the detector has to change. If you look at the detector in biology, structural biology, when I started to do synchronization, you needed 2 years to solve the structure, and you needed 3 months to get the data. And then you have to put plate of glasses to try to have the electronic structure and so on. It's another world. Today, this is bad because we were making a lot of money at the beginning of the SRI. Now they don't do any money anymore because people come, they even don't come, they send it by mail in liquid nitrogen liquid. And the sample is put automatically, and in 10 minutes, they have the structure and it's going out. So there's an enormous evolution. But I don't see for the moment the storage is starting to reach, from my point of view, a limit. Except maybe the Chinese, because they have so much money that I think they will end up by building maybe a machine like this. They have a project, I know. But from my point of view, I don't think it's worthwhile. From my point of view, it's much better to have less money. Because instead to use your feet, you use your brain. And that's much more.
Gente, vamos agradecer o Yves então.